Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by grants from the members of the National Education Association of New Mexico, an organization of professionals who believe that investing in public education is an investment in our state's economic future, and by a grant from the Healy Foundation, Taos, New Mexico.
Hello, I'm Lorene Mills, and welcome to Report from Santa Fe. Today we're doing one of the most important topics of the session. We're going to talk about ethics. We're going to talk about campaign finance reform. We're going to talk about transparency and sunshine. And our guests today are, first of all, Mr. Sunshine, if I may call you that, Senator Sander Rue, Republican from Albuquerque. What's your district, pretty much?
District 23 represents a good part of the northwest quadrant of Albuquerque.
And you have been given awards by things like the Foundation of Open Government for your work in your leadership in setting up what is called the Sunshine Portal. What is that?
Well, the Sunshine Portal was where we created a user-friendly website where essentially the business of the state of New Mexico is online, where the citizens of New Mexico can go to get information about the structure of their state government, how budgets work, and just begin to engage and understand better what it is we do as legislators so they can become part of that process, and we're continually expanding that.
And we'll talk about those expansions in a minute, but first I must introduce your friend, Senator Peter Wirth, Democrat from Santa Fe. You were 4 years in the House, and then now 7 years in the Senate. Did you guys come in at the same time?
We did.
So it's 7 years?
Yes.
7 years. Yeah, 11 years. It's hard to believe.
Lucky 11.
Yeah.
Lucky 11. You come from a very New Mexico family. John Gamin was your maternal grandfather. Your paternal grandfather was a teacher at the Los Alamos Ranch before it became what it became. So you have deep, deep roots here. And you also have gotten awards, Common Cause, Green Champion. You know, we could do the whole show talking about your awards, but thank you for the work that you both do with transparency. Now, you've had ethics bills year after endless year. Talk to me about, we'll both talk about, what is the resistance to ethics? It should be the most basic thing that we all agree on.
You know, let me say this, Lorene, and it's interesting having kind of been here through the transition. And when I came, there were no cameras. There really was not an ability to participate unless you came down and logged the many hours in the committee rooms. And even being from Santa Fe, where obviously the constituents are here, it just, because of the legislative schedule, we simply don't run as well and efficiently as many folks think we should. And so one of the really great things about kind of seeing this transition happening and working with Senator Rue on this is to kind of turn the lights on this place and to put cameras up in, starting with the Senate chamber. That was a big fight. And the last call of the Senate was over putting cameras in the Senate, and that was our first year, 2009. And so slowly but surely, this is all opening up, and it makes the process more accessible, which is a really important thing.
Yeah. And I remember for that first time, it was like the backs of 5 heads. They had a camera right there, and all you saw, you couldn't see who was talking. They have refined it a lot.
Well, you could tell pretty easily who was losing their hair and who wasn't. But we have come off a long way, and now people at home can, go onto the state legislative website, and they can, in their pajamas, sit there and be engaged in what we're doing on the floor of the Senate. They can listen in on what we're doing in the committees. And there's a lot of work to be done. And you mentioned ethics, too, and I want to come back to something on that. To the extent that we have a more open process and things are available to the public that weren't before, that goes a long way towards the ethics question. If people perhaps won't do the right thing for the right reasons, they may do it because more information is out there, the public is watching, they're seeing, they have access to information they never have before. And I think that we're seeing that, we're seeing better, not just better outcomes in government and better policy, but I think we're seeing better behavior on the part of elected officials because of the transparency and openness.
A very good point. Actually, let's stop at ethics for a minute, because maybe it's one of those words that people aren't, that put people off. But what you said about doing the right thing for the right reason, is it that simple?
Well, it should be. I think some people perhaps are conflicted, or they are confused about sometimes perhaps who it is they really represent. And again, this isn't necessarily a gotcha kind of a thing, to the extent that if this information is out there, the chips will fall where they may. People can see what's going on. They can get access to information they couldn't before. They'll ask the questions that should probably sometimes be asked, and then the outcome will be what it is. So the whole point of the transparency, it's not a gotcha kind of a thing, and I want to make that clear. This is just really getting the information out there, and then it'll go where it goes.
One thing I might add too that's tricky. I mean, this is a true citizens legislature, and for those of us that have our other full-time job, I'm a lawyer and Sander does appraisal work, there are just things where your two lives overlap. I've always, in the time I've been here, you see things practicing law, and when I was first here, I would say, well, this is a statute that's unfair, and so I would actually introduce a bill to fix it. Over the years, I've kind of pulled back because it just feels uncomfortable to be doing things, and it's not that it's benefiting me, it's just that you do have these two lives, and figuring out where that intersection occurs and when you should back off. Yesterday, on a very important vote with the confirmation of Hannah Scandera, one of the lawyers in the chamber, Senator Daniel Ivy Soto, recused himself because he had a specific case, and that's really the exception more than the norm. So again, I think it's something that we all need to think through. I've got one coming up that I'm probably going to do the same thing. Senator Ryan on the Conservation Committee, he does a lot of federal lobbying, and so he's very good about just disclosing and then stepping back.
To go back to something that you said too, and because you have you've introduced bill after bill for us to have an ethics commission, and you say it's not a gotcha thing, because one of the functions of an ethics commission is to educate everybody about what's right and what's wrong. I'll never forget, two of our state treasurers went to prison for improprieties, illegalities, and I remember Michael Montoya saying, but kickbacks is how we've always done business here. And I thought, what if he really means that he didn't know that this was wrong because the guy before him had done it, the guy after him had done it? So one of the functions of the Ethics Commission is to educate so that everybody's on the same page. And what is even the appearance of impropriety, and how to stay away from that?
Well, there has to be a mechanism, too, for legislators or elected officials. If they have a question about something, there needs to be a process where they can go and perhaps get some advice or some counsel on how to proceed, instead of just hoping that they guessed right or did the right thing. So and again, the more open and transparent that these processes are, and if there's an opportunity for people to ask these questions if they really are concerned about doing what might be perceived to be the right thing or the wrong thing, I think that goes a long way towards improving the outcomes.
And there's more than just, I know you take an ethical oath when you're sworn in as a lawmaker or as a state official, and there should be some, like you say, somewhere to go if you have questions. And right now, if someone has committed a breach of what other people think is unethical, there's nowhere to go to bring that up and to maybe right that wrong.
Well, let me correct you.
Please do.
There actually
is.
Yeah, there is an internal ethics process. It's kind of mysterious. Yeah. Well, I'm not on that committee, but there is a process where a complaint can be filed against a member, and then if there's an initial investigation, and if there's a finding of probable cause, which is pretty low standard, more likely than not, then it can be taken to the next step. We, of course, did one of the more interesting things I've ever done was being on the impeachment committee for Robert V. Hill when that whole thing went through the House, and that was kind of exposed and has us in his different role. So there is this internal process, but I think that there's a cry for having a more, again, transparent process, and Lorraine, you nail it, because it's not just trying to lure someone in after they've made a mistake. I think what's so important is to have a body that can help educate all of us, quite frankly, on all these little twists and turns that we take as we try and do the job that we've been elected to do up here.
Yeah. And so, in the effort toward transparency and campaign financing, let's see, you have the bill. Who's got the bill about if you're taking campaign finance funds, you cannot pay yourself and your wife?
I've got that one. That's seems like these are the no-brainers.
Yeah.
And then also, this is the public finance system, which is something I still believe in. You know, we've had a big discussion going on here in Santa Fe, given our mayor's race, and a lot of folks saying that public financing doesn't work. I truly think that in this Citizens United, the U.S. Supreme Court decision, post-Citizens United world of unlimited money that's out there and the quote-unquote dark money, that there really is a role for public financing. And I was incredibly proud to see this Court of Appeals race with Judge Hannessy and Carrie Kernan. They both took public financing. That's the first time the two judges have participated on either side. And, you know, they took the money they had, they ran the campaign using that money, and in the end, you know, one of them won, but they did it in a respectful way, and I think that's the model for public financing. Yeah. But certainly we need to tighten this statute up, and I have a bill to do that.
Yeah, and since you're the pioneer with the Sunshine Portal, the Secretary of State, as a result of your early work, had the Sunshine Portal for the lobbyists, and now somehow that seems to have gone offline just when we kind of need it the most.
Well, I agree, and that's one thing that I think. One of the things I talked about. There's more work to be done.
Yeah.
There is much more work to be done as far as being able to get that information about the lobbyists, their sources, of money, and then how they're spending it, and to whom are they giving it to. I mean, we come a long way with, and Senator Wirth, to his credit, as far as the finance reporting of candidates. And that is coming off a long way. And the Secretary of State's website is very good about that. But we seem to have missed that with the lobbyists. And they're very much players in this game, if you will. And I think that all needs to be made very apparent and transparent. And again, not a gotcha per se, but if you see that and you understand it, explains some things. It will explain some things when you begin to get into this process and understand what's going on.
Yeah.
And lobbyists serve I think an invaluable function up here. There are good ones and bad ones, and but they serve a practical purpose for us as legislators when they do what they do correctly. But the public, all of us, should be aware of, like I say, their sources of money and how they're spending it when they're up here.
And even former Senator Feldman in her book points out that even though people can think that large sums of money given to you as a campaign donation might not affect your judgment, but she says it's hard for it not to. Not that anyone's choosing the dark side, but it leaves you a little more open to considering that possibility. Well, we're speaking today with two wonderful senators, Senator Sander Rue, Republican from Albuquerque, Senator Peter Wirth, Democrat from Santa Fe. We have so much to cover. I'm going to ask you now about the P&M bill. To talk about transparency. So who wants to, you're co-sponsoring it, right?
We are.
Well, then tell us.
Well, the thing about this bill is it's possible for electric users, homeowners, or businesses to understand that they have essentially a non-changing flat base rate. But all of a sudden they notice their utility bill going up. And the reason that can happen is there's a mechanism now where it's a pass-through with the fuel costs. So say P&M or certain other utilities, if the cost of their fuel goes up, now they are allowed to automatically pass that increase in their fuel costs on to the consumers. And there are cases where certain other utilities that use electricity and just homeowners are seeing their bills just incrementally go up, and sometimes in pretty significant jumps. There really isn't a hearing or a process to vet that before it happens. There's a mechanism where it just passes through automatically. So what we're trying to do is to at least have a hearing so that the utility company can talk about why they're doing this and justify it before it actually happens. And you can make the case too when they have these flow-throughs. The question arises: are they really managing their costs as effectively as they could? Are they keeping up with their equipment maintenance and upgrading things to the extent they're really making efficient use of that fuel? and you know, I'm not saying that they aren't, but it just creates a situation where if you know you can just pass that cost on, carte blanche,
Right, you're
then
not gonna
maybe, and
try
if you
to-
got to make a decision about how you know how you're going to spend the money within the company, you may look past some of the maintenance issues or really trying to negotiate the best deals you can for your fuel cost, and focus on other things. So we're just, again, it's just transparency. We're just wanting to have a hearing so that the public and other stakeholders can see what's going on and ask questions about why.
So, and this has been, I chair the Senate Conservation Committee, and so we spend a lot of time, and I've learned, you continue to learn. One of the things in the legislature, you never stop learning. But having investor-owned utilities that are regulated and have a monopoly, you know, means that there needs to be a check, and the check is the Public Regulation Commission. And so the challenge is whether it's renewable energy, which is pushing for things like community solar. Senator Bingaman came to our committee, and this is one of his big issues. He was out at Stanford, worked with George Shultz, again, bipartisan. You know, where's our energy future? You see something like that comes in, and PNM immediately pushes back, and oh no, this is deregulation, retail wheeling, and you know, they want to keep their little world, but then they've got this, the fuel clause is one of those exceptions where really I think there needs to be some oversight, because again, it's consistent, you know, with the whole transparency concept. I think once you require the information to be out there and the process to be disclosed, all of a sudden things happen in different ways. And we've certainly seen that here in this building, but this is another example where, again, it just covers so many different areas, and just kind of turn the lights on and let's all take a look. And and I think folks react at all levels when we do.
And I love that line that sunshine is the best disinfectant. You know, so we'll shine lights. A bill that you've carried for a long, long time, and you finally got it, was the taxing of out-of-state corporations. So I think at the end of 2 sessions ago, it was part of that tax package.
We had a piece of that done, for sure, and this is the bill that allows out-of-state corporations to move money around and create subsidiaries and avoid paying their share. I think, you know, I will say, Lorraine, tax reform is something that we desperately need in this state. It's not a partisan issue. One of our members, Senator Scherer, has been pushing this kind of 2% consumption tax across the board, and I think that this is an area where I would hope that as Governor Martinez moves into her second term, that at some point she will come down and sit with us at the table and actually try and put together a tax package that lowers rates and broadens the base. You know, there is a willingness in both chambers, bipartisan, to do this. It is darn tough, because you've got to take votes where you're taking away someone's hard-earned exemption. But boy, do we ever need to do this. So.
Well, your former colleague, Tim Keller, who is now the auditor, wanted to do that tax expenditure budget, because we are giving away billions in tax exemptions to people. And if we just looked at it all, because when there was the issue of, are we giving too much to the film industry, then people would say, oh, but look what we're giving to oil and gas. And you're right, you need to shine your famous sunshine on it and just say, look, this is not working for our state, especially now that we're in the oil price crunch. We really need to focus on this. Well, it will take visionary leadership. We might be sitting here with some of them. I wish you all the best in trying to do that. Meanwhile, you are going at it piece by piece. You've got a bill this time for the restaurant chains.
Well, we do.
The national restaurant
That's
chains.
right. I mean, you look at it, it's one of those things. I think we're the last Western state with a corporate tax that allows this. I call it a loophole. Others might call it an incentive. But one of the things I think from 2013 there, we did the big box retail. And I think after all those years of fighting this as the worst thing that could ever happen, it was quite interesting to see all the different campaigns run in the state legislative level in 2014 about leveling the playing field and closing the loopholes. So again, I think, you know, this we're not raising taxes. As you say, there's a huge pot of money that's just not coming in. And if you take away some of these exemptions, deductions, all of a sudden there's a bigger pot of money that can be spread out so we can lower the rates. And that's what's so important.
Well, it's going to take leadership, and I applaud your efforts in this direction because it's so important. Now, I want people to know how long you all work. Just as an example, you started at the Rules Committee yesterday, and you ended up still at, 9 at night presenting your bill before Conservation, and you were at 11 o'clock presenting your bill about uniform, people who are dead. Who's going to access their Facebook account? What do you call that?
Yeah, digital access.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. What happens to your password?
Yeah.
You know, when you're gone, how does someone get into your computer? All your music, you know, your iTunes library. What happens to that? Where does it go? So, yeah, interesting bill that did get put on last night, Senate Judiciary, at 10:45.
Yeah.
So that's a little late for this early in the session.
You guys look so fresh today. But that's it. You know, people, the public will sometimes complain, you know, that you go to these parties and you do all this. I watch everything that goes on in the Capitol, and I know the hours are grueling. And yet, when you present your bill, you're bright and you consider it in depth and all these perspectives. It's really, thank you for your hard work. So what should we look for? We've got 5 minutes left. Give us your...
Well, we're going to have some of the more interesting, controversial probably legislation coming pretty soon. We got a little bit of that yesterday with the confirmation of Hannah Scandera as the Cabinet Secretary for the Public Education Department. And then we're going to be having Right to Work is going to be coming over. And we're going to be having minimum wage coming. So we're going to begin to get into some of these pieces of legislation that the public has probably been following, you know, through the media that they really understand. And it's going to be very interesting, perhaps entertaining for the public to you know, go online and start to watch some of these floor debates or committee meetings, because these are things that people understand that they've really been paying attention to, and everybody at one level or another has some skin in the game on the outcomes of some of these pieces of legislation.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly agree. It's going to be entertaining. I think, you know, of course, it's the first time in 60 plus years that we've got a Republican-controlled House, and so I think a lot of legislation over there is rolling out on party line votes, and so we don't always work like that in the state Senate. I think there's since I've been there, one of the things that keeps me coming back and gives me hope is that there's a whole range of areas where, you know, I quite frankly have passed bills only because I've had Republican votes, and so it doesn't work in as partisan a manner. The big kind of thing that your viewers should all watch is, and I think that the interesting dynamic will be whether or not the committee process is upheld in the Senate. You know, it's got a long history back in the day of whoever had 22 votes could do whatever they want. And so this has always been the challenge, and I think our majority floor leader, Michael Sanchez, and the minority floor leader, who they work together on running that floor, you know, if all of a sudden we have a kind of revolution and someone wants to blast a bill down to the floor or do something that doesn't go through the process, that'll be a real test. And so, you know, there's certainly undercurrents working on things like that, and again, I think we'll see how it all plays out.
Well, they do that a lot in the House. They're known for blasting bills out. But didn't they, I think last time, just a few weeks ago, they blasted their own bill out. That was just like, I had never heard of that being done before. Wait a minute, you already have the votes. You don't need to do that. It's quite all right. Well, it's a fascinating process. I want to come back to ethics again. Do you think that we can actually get the money out of politics and have the donors have a disclosure of who the donors are? Because I'm looking at it, if you can just step to the Citizens United and the national scene, the amount of money that was poured into our New Mexico races with no disclosure. How can we fix that on all sides? I mean, it's the only people who win are the media outlets, the TV stations, and the rest of us are going, oh my God, if I see that ad one more time. So what can be done about that huge influx of as you say, as someone says, dark money.
But you know what's really interesting, and Senator Wirth has been on the forefront of this, but every time at the federal level or at the state level, if we do something that we think, creates a better process and more information being shared and all that, the process finds another way. It's to me, it's fascinating. You think you've got it all set up, and then some other kind of sub-corporation or something is set up that can bypass and circumvent.
It's like swishing mercury.
Something's going to come out the other end. So, my good friend Peter here continues to fight those battles and plug the holes in the dam. But there's obviously we're not there yet, and I think there's a general consensus. I think you got to split this thing up. That you got spending limits or spending caps. That's one argument, but the disclosure, who's giving the money? I think there's pretty much bipartisan agreement on that, and I think that goes a long way then towards, once you get it out there, then it begins to explain certain things, and the chips will fall where they may. And I think that's what we should be working towards, just disclosure of donors.
Well, there's been a recent study of the lobbying against the payday loan caps, which is now roughly 3,000% these poor people can pay back. They wanted to cap it at 36, which is already usury. I don't know, that's a legal term.
Mm-hmm.
I'm using it in the common sense. And that, the lobbyists were able to stop that. So what can be done?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. The Citizens United decision set us back immensely across the country, and we've got folks fighting at the federal level, Senator Udall, obviously, but it just creates these unlimited amounts of money that can be given by corporations, by unions, and so the one thing we can do there is have that disclosure. And so again, I've carried the bill the last 2 years that I've been very proud it's passed the Senate unanimously, which shows that I think there's a willingness. And then we get over to the House, and all of a sudden, it's just as Sander says, the forces start coming out of the different spot on both sides, and I can't get it through. This year, Representative Jim Smith is carrying a mirror bill in the House, and so we're going to start it over there first, and we'll see what happens. So. Yeah. Keep working on it.
I really want to applaud you both. You are champions of what you do, and I'm really, really grateful to you in your busy day, because I know how busy your days are, for taking the time. So our guests today are Senator Peter Wirth and Senator Sander Rue. Thank you both so very much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Lorraine.
And I'd like to thank you, our audience, for being with us today on Report from Santa Fe. We'll see you next week.
Past archival programs of Report from Santa Fe are available at the website reportfromsantafe.com. If you have questions or comments, please email info@reportfromsantafe.com. Report from Santa Fe is made possible in part by grants from the members of the National Education Association of New Mexico, an organization of professionals who believe that investing in public education is an investment in our state's economic future, and by a grant from the Healy Foundation, Taos, New Mexico.